Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode. I have the pleasure of interviewing Patrick Dunn, the founder and CEO at Benefi. How's it going, Patrick?
Not too bad, Nicholas. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's exciting.
Yeah, well, we've been following you for a while. Now you just came in second place for the Desjardins FinTech competition. And well, I thought that this would be a good time to catch up. And for people who've perhaps heard about you, we'll maybe get a deeper dive into Benefi and, well, your story as a founder. So to kick it off, could you, for those who have not heard of Benefi, who've not had the privilege of learning about Benefi, could you please tell us a bit about what you guys do?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Benefi is a transformative employee group benefit which improves the financial wellness of Canadians. And we do this a number of ways. So, offered through the employer, of course. We help employees promote good savings. We help improve financial literacy, and we help provide access to affordable credit and loans for people who really need them.
Awesome. And so, could you tell us a bit about how you got started with this idea? What's your background? What's the genesis story of Benefi?
Yeah, so there's kind of a long story there, but maybe the shortest version. I've been a career insights and innovation guy for a long time. My role at many companies has been to help uncover unmet consumer needs and to think about how to develop products and services that help solve them. I was working at a major insurer and financial services firm for a number of years, and you start picking up these big signals in the marketplace, and a big signal which was really hard to miss was the debt crisis in Canada. I think we all know the stats now. Canadians are using more of our post tax income and are more indebted right now than nearly any time in the history of the country. And that felt like a big meaty problem that we didn't see anybody in the marketplace really addressing in the right way. I started getting excited, like how could we potentially tackle that? Having done a lot of research, spoken to a lot of financial planners, advisors, and a few other folks to understand how do you help somebody escape from debt. Started thinking, pulling together some of the pieces that would help articulate a solution. And that's what Benefi is, providing the right tools, the right knowledge, and the kind of right behavioral nudges to shift financial behavior in the right direction and wean you off of expensive predatory debt.
And there's, could you give us because there's loads of companies that focus on like personal finance management and helping, consumers build their emergency funds and get out of debt. Could you give us a bit more detail of how you guys function in the space or how you're different than the rest?
Yeah. First and foremost, I think the consumer segments which we're serving are by definition, I think a lot of financial institutions would actually call them the underserved. And this could include, people who are struggling with debt right now, people who are starting out in life and maybe don't have a great credit score established yet, or importantly, even newcomers to Canada. It's a real problem for a lot of folks who are new to Canada because you might have an amazing credit score in your home country, but when you arrive in Canada, you essentially have to start fresh.
Hmm.
The credit scores, their international credit scores, don't translate or are not transferable very well. And, if you have an unexpected expense and you have to borrow, you're forced to do so at really unfavorable rates. And all of those groups, in a way, kind of pay a tax for their situation. You pay a financial premium just because your credit score is not established or is unknown. And that's a real social issue I think we're excited about helping alleviate.
Yeah, well, it's generally the ones that are most in need that have to pay the most to get out of that situation, which is really upside down. But
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
um,
And to kind of expand on what we do and how we're a little bit different. I mean, there's complexity in our business for sure. We are classified as a B to B to C. A lot of
mhm.
letters in there. So, we sell into a company and the company provides us for their employees. There's a lot of stakeholders there that kind of have to be appeased as part of our process. And we've talked a little bit about what's in it for the employee. They get a better way to borrow, they get a way to build savings, and they get a way to improve financial literacy. But what's interesting is there's a lot in it for the employer as well. If you think about why employers offer employee group benefits, they're not necessarily altruistic in nature, although some of them certainly are. But employers offer these things because ultimately they're tied to metrics that companies care about.
Right.
And we can imagine what those are, attracting and retaining great talent, employee productivity, employee retention and engagement, absenteeism, and there's something even called presenteeism, which I'm hearing about, which means kind of you're focused at work as opposed to being distracted about other things. And I think the great thing about Benefi is that we actually touch on a great many of those metrics. We know that if you're financially unwell, if you're struggling financially, it actually impacts your mental and physical health as well, demonstratively. There's a lot of science behind it, which says, if you're not doing very well financially, if you have chronic financial stress, that has a very clear demonstrable impact on your physiology. Stress is interesting because it actually suppresses your immune system. Stress is a fight or flight mechanism, which is great if there's a bus hurtling toward you and you need to jump out of the way. But stress does really awful things to you over a long period of time. And people who are financially unwell demonstratively have or actually take more sick days. And these are things that employers really care about. So we love the fact that we've been having great conversations with actually quite a wide range of employers who are excited about helping play a positive role in this space.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, it's two birds, one stone in a way. You're helping the employer and definitely helping the end user, which is the employee. No, it's a really interesting model. Where are you at now? I know you just won the Desjardins competition. Well, second place in the competition. You guys did the Ascension program with FinTech Cadence. Could you give us a snapshot of where you're at now, and also then the progression of how you guys got to this point?
Yeah. So the snapshot where we are right now, we have quite a number of signed first clients now, including some fairly large organizations across Canada. We're now counting down the days to launch. It's looking like it's going to be relatively early in the new year. Our product is essentially built, our basic MVP, and we're really excited to get out there and test this model and show folks what we can do. And how we got here today, I think it's been a journey of almost a year now. I think I left my last employer, it was November of last year, November, December of last year. I started with, as a guy with a pitch deck. So, as with a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of rejection those first couple of months. But, the good news is I think one of the first things we did was put together like a really great advisory team. We've got folks across, credit scoring, established and very successful serial founders and CEOs. We've got some senior executives at the Canadian Lenders Association, and even a for-fee financial planner. If we're talking to folks who are going to help us think through how do you really shift the needle in consumer debt and improve financial wellness, we've absolutely engaged the right folks. And part of that strategy was also engaging with Ascension and FinTech Cadence. I think we recognized that there was an awful lot of work to do in terms of getting better and recognize that we didn't have all the answers. And engaging with folks like that who can connect us into the FinTech ecosystem with some great subject matter experts, help challenge some of our thinking and evolve our strategy was immensely valuable. Maybe this is the first piece of advice for any future entrepreneurs. Definitely recognize you don't have all the answers and surround yourself with folks who can challenge your thinking is something I would recommend for everybody.
And so, could we speak about this first pitch deck? How you got the idea? You're at your job. What was that like, and how did you then say, okay, this is enough that I'll drop everything and go into this new direction?
Hey, maybe it was a midlife crisis. I'm pretty old now, so maybe it's a midlife crisis that I wanted to have a positive impact. But it felt like a social injustice, for lack of a better word. Why is it that if you're an individual who has a lot of money, you're able to obtain financial literacy and advice from anybody. You can walk into any advisor's office anywhere, and they're very pleased to spend time with you and give you as much information as you want. Because if you're a high net worth individual, you're a whale. You're absolutely the sort of person they want to speak with. On the same token, if you're doing very well financially, and you have an unexpected expense or need to buy something, it's really easy to do so. And you have great rates at 3% or less, because you can get a HALOC or secure against your existing assets and borrow and buy a yacht or whatever high net worth people do.
Like,
But if
oh
you're
damn, I really need to buy a yacht today. Shit, and I have, yeah, well, yeah, maybe that happens.
yeah, but we touched on this a little earlier. I mean, if you're the other end of that spectrum, you're starting out in life. You're a millennial or someone fresh out of school. Your experience in the financial ecosystem is very different. You may have trouble getting a loan or a line of credit from a traditional lender. You probably don't have a house yet. You can't get a HALOC. And now you're forced to, if you have an unexpected expense, you need to fix your car or something, and you don't have an emergency fund.
No, no, for sure.
That's going on your credit card,
Well,
or God
50%,
forbid,
close to 50% live paycheck to paycheck in Canada. So
yeah, yeah,
it's an important portion of the population that are in this situation.
yeah. So to come back to your question, thinking about this issue, you forced me to think about like how could we potentially solve it. And I spent quite a number of years at an innovation consultancy called Idea Couture, and they had kind of a specific process by which they would pursue innovation, and it tended to include some deep customer empathy to understand what is the problem that consumers are encountering. It would include signal scanning to look at what's happening on a global scale. How is the convergence of technology, shifts in demographics, shifts in behavioral patterns, in the regulatory environment, and kind of the collision of all these things create opportunity. And in doing that process, it became pretty clear there might be a system we could employ which would have a positive impact on the debt crisis that we're encountering. And again, that's kind of the Benefi ideation process.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, let's now like go back to you, Patrick, as the founder. So you're working a 9 to 5 for many years. Um, where are you from, by the way? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Brampton.
Brampton, Ontario.
Yep, exactly right.
Okay. Um, and then did you have any entrepreneurial experience there? Is this your first startup, or you've tested entrepreneurship or dipped your feet in the entrepreneurial waters before?
Yeah, I'd say this is probably my second go around. When I moved back from Japan, I actually hung out a shingle and had my own like market research organization that I started here in Canada. So it was kind of a side hustle while I was doing other things. It was a great gig. Basically, I was coordinating and creating and running market research and market strategy projects from Toronto, but running field work in Tokyo and a bunch of other places. Um, great gig. I found I couldn't sustain two jobs for a long period of time, so I ended up doing that for about 3 years, and then kind of hung it up. But great experience to get started. This is absolutely my first tech startup.
Okay. And what were you doing in Japan? How long were you there for?
Yeah, so I finished school. I'm not going to date myself. I'm quite old. I finished school. I went to McMaster University, graduated, worked at Xerox for a year. Found I was terrible at selling photocopiers, and decided I wanted to go and do something for a year. So I decided I would go and teach English in Japan for a year, and quickly found I liked English teaching, but wanted to do something else. So I actually got my start in customer empathy and customer research in Japan, where I changed my job and worked for a company called JMI, which was a kind of a market research and strategy shop where we helped foreign firms understand and succeed in the sometimes very difficult Japanese marketplace.
Cool.
So we were running projects for Clorox and Microsoft and a bunch of others to understand how to engage that local population. Yeah, I think that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's a very cool experience. And so then I'm curious to hear the rest. So what made you come back?
Um, I had been there for I think about 5-6 years, and
Okay.
it was it's a traditional story. I had planned to go for 1 year, ended up meeting somebody. 1 year turned into two, turned into four, turned into five. That person is now my wife, and we had some kind of big discussions about, well, what's next, and those big plans about if there's kids, where might we want them to grow up, and we thought we would give Canada a try for a little bit. So here we are.
Okay. Very cool. Um, awesome. So yeah, you have a slew of experience, and I'm sure that foreign experience as well gives you a different perspective as well, and that working in that shop for customer empathy, I guess it really helps you better understand the well people in general, and
Yeah, having to um, be cognizant and conscious of trying to understand consumer needs, especially when they're not even in your own language. I think it's a great practice for anybody. Trying to develop customer empathy, finding out the best way to ask questions to understand the difference between what people are saying and what they're doing,
mm-hmm.
is kind of a good skill I think every entrepreneur should be developing. Because some of the greatest products and services out there have a really good empathy component built in, where they're doing a really good job of listening to consumers, listening to feedback, and kind of evolving the product vision based on that in kind of an efficient and meaningful way, and deliberate way. I think is a good practice to instill.
So what I find really interesting is a lot of founders try to avoid the validation phase or the customer interviews, but that seems like it's your greatest strength. Now, building a tech startup, how did you and how are you going about that? Do you have also a technical background that you're not telling us about, or did you have people who joined your team?
Yeah, so I mean, my technical background is not strong. I spent a little time in tech at a company called D2L in a kind of a non-technical role. I'm in the process of taking the Harvard CS50 course, so I'm learning a few things. But absolutely, that was, I think, one of the biggest challenges we've had is finding like the right talent to bring on board. And the good news is we actually have a really great CTO now, who's teaching us an awful lot about things, and has some great ideas about the direction of the organization. So finding great tech talent is an absolute requisite for somebody like me as a non-technical co-founder.
And how do you go about that? Because that's a question we get a lot. Like it's hard, but no one ever knows where to even start. How did you start?
Yeah, so this is probably one of those parts of the podcast where I can tell you all the ways we failed, as opposed to the multiple successes. So it started in a lot of ways. I got on cofounderslab.com, started a bunch of conversations. If you don't know, Co-Founders Lab, or folks in the line don't know, Co-Founders Lab is basically like a LinkedIn for founders, where you can find people who are looking to start or a company or have a company or looking for partners, and kind of get matched up based on skills or requirements. And it's a great tool. Had a couple bites of the line and a couple initial relationships through that, and it didn't quite yield the results we wanted. Um, so I guess if arriving at the great place we are now, it really amounted to a lot of hustle and a lot of networking. It means engaging your kind of your social and business network to say, hey, do you know people? We're looking for this kind of profile. And I have to engage your advisory team and a bunch of other folks. And, you start having coffee meetings with people who might be a fit. And over time, you kind of generate that, you do find that some right candidates. For us, it's been quite a journey. I mean, we've done other things like social postings for the role itself, and it ended up not kind of attracting the folks we were really after. So kind of using your personal and business network to find the right folks, I think is what I would recommend here.
Okay. Yeah. Some people test, putting flyers on telephone poles in the street. Co-founder wanted, you know.
It's
Yeah.
not easy. Yeah.
Um, it, I wanted to know also your story about getting these first conversations for your first clients. So you signed some first clients for your first launch in early 2021. How did you make that happen? Because that's generally the biggest hurdle.
Yeah, so it's a really good question, and for sure, right, it's the toughest thing because everybody knows the product adoption curve with early adopters and laggards, and kind of that spectrum of how kind of the mass populace adopts. It's certainly very true in our industry as well. And in our case, we're dealing with HR leaders and a few other folks like that. Um, and what's interesting is our product and service is also in a way like a tough thing for a lot of organizations to adopt. There's a certain taboo around um, you know employee debt, and this is something that the company wants to be involved in, especially if you think about we know the consumer behavior for a lot of employees is actually to borrow through their employer right now. Sometimes you'll actually have people approach their employer and say things like, well, my truck has crashed, or I'm getting married, or I need to put a down payment on an apartment I want to rent. Can you give me a cash advance? And that person's boss says, yes, we'll figure it out, and they go to the payroll and they make it happen. But like that experience like sucks for everybody. There's a certain kind of ickiness involved to me as an employee revealing that I'm in debt,
Mm-hmm.
and that person's boss, whoever he or she is, having to kind of manage that process, and also knowing that you as my employee are maybe not doing very well financially. It's kind of kind of an icky process. And I think our argument is that a third party needs to manage it, and that's what Benefi does. Um, so to kind of come back to your question about how do we find, not only first clients, but how do we find those early adopters who can kind of see past the current taboo? And I think part of what we did, or I did, is, actually funny. I went through my LinkedIn contacts, and I started thinking through like who are the folks that I think are really forward thinking, who are like the HR leads that I've met through my career, who I think are um, early adopters, who are empathetic to the needs of their employees, and who is willing to, in a way, take a little risk to help support them. And I ended up with kind of a relatively short list, and then I actually cross-referenced it against a couple of the lists that are out there, which include things like Canada's top employers to work for, and Canada's fastest growing employers.
Okay.
Once I did that, there was actually a few names that stood out, and it actually weren't that many people that I called. But we got a pretty good rate of bites of the line for those first employers rather.
Neat. Okay. Very cool. Well, I hope that the first projects are going to go really well for you, and I'm really curious to see in 2021 for the actual launch announcement. Um,
Yeah.
for others who are going to be following your footsteps, maybe you said it's been a year now that you just about a year since you left the job and took the plunge. Maybe there's some people listening this month that are deciding the same thing, and we'll be having them on the podcast same time next year. What would be some advice you'd share for people working in the industry that are have an idea like you had, saw a need, and are considering going for it?
Um, Great question. There's obviously an awful lot we've learned through this past year. I think if there's one thing you want to do is mentally steel yourself for a lot of rejection. You might have a really great vision for what you want to do. You may feel there's some good customer demand for it, hopefully validated through, speaking to actual customers. You may have some evidence of what's happening in the marketplace. You may have all those things, but not everyone is like an early adopter, and not everyone is going to get that. And I think, I think part of my earlier challenges, my first challenge in the first few months, especially getting the door slammed in my face in a lot of places, probably the fact that I didn't articulate that vision super well at the beginning. I was pouring ideas onto a pitch deck, and wasn't always doing a great job of that. But I think the real lesson is that you absolutely need, as an entrepreneur, to recognize that not everyone's going to get what you're thinking right now. You are going to have to deal with a ton of rejection. And maybe the second part of that piece of advice is learn what you can from that. Try to understand why people are saying no. It's not always what you think. It's not always, sometimes it's not like your idea is bad. Sometimes it's, the person is revealing that, look, I don't have the confidence to roll the dice in something like this. This is an unknown to me. It's more comfortable for me to not make changes at work, to try something new. I'm perfectly comfortable with the status quo. And that's something you need to address through either marketing your product, or how you approach people, and who you're approaching, to overcome those challenges.
What's some of the best advice you got in the last year to help you along the way?
That's a hard question, because there's been so much of it. I've got notebooks filled full of stuff that I've like double underlined because someone's been speaking to me, and I'm like, oh, you blow my mind here.
Maybe,
what I can't.
maybe maybe I'll be more specific then, maybe to help you out, and it might give you some ideas. But as a non-technical founder, then trying to get into the tech space, into a sector that's not particularly easy, does that give you any
Yeah,
ideas?
I'd say then, the advice and kind of the learning that we've had is working really closely with your technical team, to prioritize in the right way. And I say that because a lot of non-technical co-founders are, in some cases, the idea guy or girl, and we can dream up these great, amazing futures about what might be. But there's a price to pay, both a financial one and one in time, for everything that you're tacking on. So working with your team early as possible to prioritize the right way, to think about what absolutely has to be included and what can come in later versions, is something everyone should have as part of their process.
Okay.
In my case, we progressed pretty far along in terms of the ideation and consumer validation stage before we actually had the right technical people involved. So there was a kind of a serious conversation about paring it back into a place where the MVP could be created in the right way.
Right. Right. Well, no, but that first step is critical to really understand you're addressing an actual need. And a lot of the times, if it's a technical founder, they want the tech to be perfect before going out to the market and speaking with people. And
Yeah.
you did it the opposite way, which is the most direct and efficient way. So kudos there, and well, it's paying off.
Yeah, let's hope so.
So this time next year, Patrick, if we're to catch up, what are your predictions? This is being recorded, so we'll be able to listen back and see and catch up. But what are you looking forward to 2021? Where's Benefi going?
Yeah, so Benefi, we want to do like a great launch of the product early in the new year. We want to prove that the model is working. We've got a unique kind of risk and credit model, which we're looking to prove. And by this time next year, what we expect to have is some great customer testimonials about how Benefi has improved their life. If we're able to wean somebody off of additional credit card debt, for example, we know in a typical case with the average credit card balance Canadians are carrying, someone who does that, it's the equivalent of like a 1% to 3% raise in post-tax income. We can give somebody like a 3% raise on their income, help them keep a little bit more of their money. Hopefully that'll be worth a testimonial or two. So we're looking forward to helping do that, help Canadians keep more of their money, and hopefully have some really great stories about how that is working for a lot of folks.
That's awesome. Well, I'm looking
Yeah,
forward to seeing or reading those stories in next year.
yeah,
If anybody wants to get involved, contact you, or learn more about Benefi, how could they go about doing that?
yeah. So we've got our website set up. Info@benefi.ca is a great place to reach us. Happy to answer questions or comments or concerns about what we're doing. And we're absolutely excited to engage the community. And if there's anybody on the line who is an HR lead who cares about attracting, retaining, and motivating great talent, we absolutely have some great conversations to have with you.
Patrick, thank you so much for coming on the show. Nice catching up and learning more about your story. It's awesome to get that deep dive. We don't often have that time to learn this much about a founder. So thank you so much for coming on. Happy holidays. We're a bit early out, but we'll definitely keep in touch and see you in 2021.
My pleasure, Nicholas, and thank you. Really appreciate the time to have the chat.
All right. Have a good one, everyone.
Okay.